Hello, and welcome to A Course in Miracles 365. I'm your host, Tomas Garza, and this is day 17 of this live stream. This is every day here on Enlightened World Network, and I want to thank all of you for joining me here today. And thank you for all of the shares, everyone that's watching from literally all over the world, and for all of your comments and your kind words. Really, this means a great deal to me to be able to show up here and share my experience with all of you. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for sharing this with all of your friends and for your comments. And I hope that you're enjoying not only this live stream, but I hope you're enjoying the experience of going along here in A Course in Miracles, wherever you are, whatever level of personal experience you've had with this. It's never a bad time to pick it back up and start all over again, right? From scratch, as though this were the very first time you had ever encountered these materials. In Zen Buddhism, that's what they call Zen mind, beginner's mind, right? Approaching every day, every moment of every day with a fresh, new attitude, seeing things literally for the first time again. Now, I've had this experience with the workbook specifically in A Course in Miracles. I've had this experience in doing the entire workbook all the way through a couple of times. And the second time, I would encounter lessons. And my wife, Cindy, and I were talking about this just a couple of hours ago here this morning over coffee. We've each had this experience, actually, of doing the workbook, going over a lesson, and then 2 years later, going back to it and either not remembering it at all. And it's literally like we're seeing the lesson for the first time, or we remember it vividly. And what we all find, it's like reading a novel a second time through, isn't it? It's like watching a movie for a second time, or a third, or a fourth, or a fifth. If you have one that you've seen 20 times, like I have, then you will know that you notice different things every time. So wherever you are, I hope that you're finding this experience not only beneficial to you, but fun. And I actually do hope that you're finding this a little bit challenging. I really do. And I mean that from the standpoint that this is meant to challenge the way that we ourselves view not only the world, but ourselves, situations, circumstances, our relationships to other people, our relationships to ourselves, all of that, all of that. So as we populate the feed here, thank you for tuning in. Let's jump in here to lesson 10, because today what I want to highlight is an essential component of the spiritual path is ownership. Not ownership as in one owns a shirt, for example, or you own a car. Not like that, not in the sense of personal property. By that I mean ownership as in taking responsibility. Taking responsibility. That's what this lesson is all about. Lesson 10. A lot going on here. So the lesson itself reads, "My thoughts do not mean anything." Now, if you're following along, and you've been following along in this live stream, you'll recall that this sounds really familiar. So in lesson 4, the workbook says, these thoughts do not mean anything. These thoughts about yesterday's lunch do not mean anything. These thoughts about my appointment at 11 o'clock do not mean anything, and so on and so on. So what's going on today may seem like a real subtle switch, but it's very important. It's very important when we consider A Course in Miracles, and especially the workbook component of A Course in Miracles as a thought system. And it's just replacing the word "these thoughts" with "my thoughts." My thoughts do not mean anything. It is switching just one word, one syllable, and it changes the complexion of things, doesn't it? there's a difference, a big difference between these thoughts do not mean anything and my thoughts do not mean anything. Why? We're taking ownership for our own experience. Very important, isn't it? This is something that we all avoid in life. Think of the way we as human beings, when we're challenged, when we feel stressed, when we feel threatened in any way, there's a tendency, an ingrained and innate tendency in all of us to place blame, to psychologically project. This is what's meant by projection, is not liking the feeling of guilt, of anger, of rage, of frustration, and wanting to get that away from us as quickly as we possibly can. So what do? Well, we put that off on someone else. We put it off on a political figure, whoever that may be. We put it off on our ex-partner. We put it off on the dog, on the evening news, on anything. We want to get these feelings away from us as quickly as we can. So we habitually, without even thinking about it, fail to take ownership of this. That's projection. We project how we feel outward. And as we've seen already here in the workbook, that contributes to the making of the world that we see, where all of our thoughts about everything really actually don't mean anything at all. So this is a question that applies in every single aspect of life, and that is, are you taking responsibility for your life, for your experience? Are you taking responsibility for your own actions, for your own behavior, even for your own thoughts? Are you accepting that this is your experience, and the moment right now, the present moment, is an opportunity for you to choose differently? We can all do this. And exercises like these in the workbook help us do that. That's what these are for. So as challenging as you may find them, maybe you don't find them challenging at all. Maybe you find these pleasurable and a walk in the park. Perfect. The challenging ones will no doubt come. This is to change our mind about the way we view the world and ourselves. As the commentary here in lesson 10 tells us today, this idea will help to release me from all that I now believe. And it's in italics here in the commentary. So I encourage you to read this. And however you're practicing, however often you're practicing, whether it's the morning, midday, evening, whenever you think about it, it's very handy, and I highly recommend, of course, to read and reread, if you need to, the commentary for each lesson every day. They're short, and it's designed to be able to fit in to your life, because we're not saying, hey, give up everything. Give up everything here. Yeah, right. Give up everything so you can take time out, 30 seconds to a minute out a few times a day. No, we're not saying that at all. This is, when you remember it, make the time. And if you discover that you don't remember the day's idea, that's happened to me, I don't know, dozens and dozens of times. I don't know, maybe 100 times. I don't know. I'm not counting. And I encourage you to not count either on that, because what matters is that you're here right now and that you're showing up with the intention to do this. So take that action. I invite you to read this through. This is very important. My thoughts do not mean anything. We're owning our own experience here. It's a critical part of the spiritual path. However your practice looks, whatever form of spirituality you practice, does not make any difference at all what the outside exterior form is. Yeah, as I used to say, and I still say, it doesn't matter what building you go to, for example. It doesn't matter what practice you go to, what form of meditation that you practice, which branch of yoga. Doesn't matter. Just show up with the intention to be here in the present moment and change your mind about things. In other words, show up as love. Choose love instead of fear. Let's walk through the exercise here. This is very important. There's a couple of different steps. So the workbook invites us to close our eyes and repeat the idea for the day. My thoughts do not mean anything. Doesn't matter if you resist it actively. That's fine. If you don't believe it, no problem. Just close your eyes and repeat this. My thoughts do not mean anything. And then say, this idea will help to release me from all that I now believe. What we believe about the world is not exactly what's going on. We have beliefs that come to us through no fault of our own at all, through society, through our parents, through the world and the way it's structured, to keep the ego intact, to keep intact a false sense of separation. And eventually, we all have the experience that the separation is an illusion. In fact, separation of any kind does not exist. So, to the extent that you're able to accept that idea, fantastic. If this is the first time you've ever heard it phrased that way, that's fine too. You're right where you're supposed to be. So as we go along here in the workbook, eyes closed, right? This idea will help to release me from all that I now believe. And then the workbook recommends that we get specific with our thoughts. My thought about lunch does not mean anything. My thought about my appointment at the top of the hour does not mean anything. My thought about the hike we took last weekend does not mean anything. My thoughts about this live stream do not mean anything. And just indiscriminately, whatever you're thinking about, just tell yourself, my thoughts about whatever it is do not mean anything. And then the end of the practice period, no more than a minute at a time is what it recommends. Just repeat the notion that this idea will help to release me from all that I now believe. That's the purpose of this workbook. It's the purpose of A Course in Miracles and spirituality in general, no matter what form it takes. It's to release us from all that we now believe. Why? Because what we believe about ourselves is keeping us stuck. It's keeping us limited. It's keeping us cut off, frustrated, alienated, separated. That is not our reality. It's not our reality. And these exercises are here to help us undo our perception, to change our perception. In other words, to change our mind, to change our mind. Because ultimately, we're not even that. We're not even the thinking mind. Our essence is beyond even that. It's beyond words. So, if you have any questions about this or any exercises or comments, let's continue this live stream here, and I'll bring up your comments right now. It's very, very profound. And if you take nothing else out of this today, just know that this is all about our taking ownership of our own experience. I mean, in terms of spirituality, this is what it means to be an adult. This is what it means to be a grown-up, guys. We own it, you know? Yeah, if we have a beautiful thought, okay, we have a beautiful thought. If we have a negative thought, if we place blame, if we lash out at somebody, we own that, right? Because only we can choose moment to moment. You know, Jesus and the Course says throughout the Course, it says that no one is going to force us. So God, being love, does not force us to choose in favor of love. We have free will, and we have it so that we can continue to make that choice, and we're not coerced. Because what happens when we're coerced, right? I mean, when a teacher told you you had to do something a certain way, I mean, who among you was rebellious? I was. It didn't work for me. And I've talked about my experience with Sunday school growing up as a kid on here, and I will say that again. Um, yeah, if someone tries to coerce you into something, it naturally produces resistance. God does not do that. We have free will. So what are we choosing? What are we choosing? And hello, everybody, for tuning in here. Yeah, it's Carol Ann. Yeah, I like this lesson too. I love it. And Deidre, thank you for joining us and commenting. As this course is refreshing, that it gives one a perspective leading out of the box. Absolutely. Yeah, ultimately, there is no box, right? There's no container. We place all these walls up and we place these barriers up ourselves. And the course aims to remove the barriers to the experience of love, literally. And that's what we're doing, is taking the walls down. And we're doing it not by wielding a sledgehammer and doing pitched battle against them, but by recognizing that they were never there to begin with. So we just show up as love. Boom, there are no walls. But it takes time to do that. And that's what time is for. Carol Ann, all right, let's talk about this. I love it. I was raised as a Southern Baptist too. Oh, yeah. So Carol Ann writes, I always seemed at odds with my Southern Baptist upbringing. Me too. Well, we don't have that much more time on this live stream, but let me share with you a summary. I was that kid in Sunday school, that Southern Baptist, that always asked the questions, and I couldn't stomach ever the notion that God, being love, was vindictive or jealous, really, or punishing, punitive, wanted to get revenge on little sinners running around down here doing their little deeds, monkey business and whatnot. Yeah, I was that kid that asked that very question and expressed that disbelief, and nobody nobody had a satisfactory answer for me. So, as you might imagine, I left that church when I was a teenager. That was the end of that. So I can completely relate to that. And no matter what your religious upbringing is, I mean, and maybe you had a very positive upbringing in a spiritual or religious tradition, whatever that is, you know, we want to respect and honor that, because not everybody has had an experience where they wanted to run away. I certainly had an experience where I wanted to run away, and I did as soon as I was able to get out of that and do that. And yeah, it's part of experience in life, isn't it? It's a really interesting commentary on the way we limit ourselves. Because Buddha, Jesus did not intend to establish religions. They did not intend. Anyone that shows up and teaches does not intend to establish a religion. A Course in Miracles is very clear, as Jesus dictates it. A Course is not a religion. It's a self-study curriculum. It's a self-study course. And ultimately, this is all personal, because we have, even though everything is shared, of course, and we're all one, we have free will. And we're the ones that need to make the decisions about how we show up in life, whether we choose love or we choose fear. I mean, luckily, there are not 80 million decisions to make. There's one. There's one, and everything, and I mean everything, our entire experience, from everything we see, everything we feel, everything we think about, stems from that one decision. So important. So important. Yes, and so there's some comments here that are very interesting. Yeah, putting human attributes on God. Yeah, we do that, right? And I remember books and pamphlets that I used to, well, they used to pass them out actually in my Sunday school, depicting God as a white man with a beard. And I had, as you might imagine, as I just shared with all of you, I had certain reactions to that. certain reactions to that didn't sit with me. And none of this is to point blame or point a finger at anybody or say that anyone or anything is wrong per se. Ultimately, we're adults, right? This lesson is all about ownership and taking ownership. So does something resonate with you? If it does, suggestion, roll with it, right? If it does not resonate with you, then is it necessary in your life? And we all have free will. And yes, a number of us as kids, like I had no choice in the way I was raised. And most of us are in that boat. But now, as adults, we do have a choice. And it's empowering, freeing, liberating, and oh so loving to own that choice and to make that choice. All right, so if I haven't gotten to your comments and questions here on the live, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for all your questions and all the love that you've shown me. I love being here with all of you. This is absolutely fantastic, and it's a beautiful community here on Enlightened World Network. So I will see you again tomorrow, Thursday the 11th, 11 o'clock Eastern Time. So about 11:05 a.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. I invite you, as always, to check the daily show guide for the listing of times. And I thank you all again for tuning in. This has been A Course in Miracles 365, Awakening to Love. And I'll see you again tomorrow.